Over the past year and a half, companies have experienced significant fluctuation in demand. For those working in supply chain, the pressures they've had to face were no small feat. Supply chain leaders are looking to ensure that they have the most efficient order to cash processes so that they can be well prepared and ready for any future bumps in the road. I'm Scott Leahy, and this is Esker On Air. Today we have Dan Reeve, our Director of Sales and Business Development here at Esker, and Joe Pleshik, President of Terso Solutions. He's here to discuss the challenges many supply chain folks have had, particularly in the healthcare and life sciences space, and how to overcome these challenges, including visibility, efficiency, and optimizing cash flow. Thank you both for being here. I'll let you take it away, Dan.
Thanks again. I'm Dan Reeve. We're going to be talking with a good friend and a gentleman that leads a company, leads sales for an organization at Terso Solutions, a division of Promega. Now, many supply chain leaders who deployed the Esker technology operate inside the healthcare and the life science space. The challenges that we've heard over the years include things like, hey, we're striving to free up our folks to better serve our customers, plan deliveries, ensure that we can get the right product to the operating theater on time, as efficiently and quickly as possible, so that ultimately patient outcomes are achieved or improved, and we can minimize the amount of time the product is in our warehouse, we can improve our supply chain, we can collect revenue as quickly as possible, which is especially important in that sector because many folks, including leaders at Gartner, have said, hey, in this sector, the product is often very expensive. Folks really cannot afford to miss surgeries, and therefore supply chain leaders sit on a lot of inventory and cash, and it's very expensive. So those leaders will often turn to Esker as a mechanism both to free up their staff to better serve the customer, enable the accounts receivable folks to both go and deliver invoices and collect and chase money and apply that cash, and also payables. They'll enable the Esker technology as a way to ensure invoices get paid quickly and suppliers are taken care of. So I thought it would be useful to introduce Joe Pleshik, again, who's CEO, board member, business development leader, RFID and IoT rocket scientist who operates within the health supply chain, to join us and tell us a little bit more about what are the trends that Terso and Joe and his team at Terso are seeing, and any advice he might have for folks in that life science healthcare space. So Joe, thanks for coming along. Pleasure to have you. I was excited about this one, so pleased to have you here.
Dan, thank you very much. It's my pleasure and an honor to join you today to talk a little bit about the solutions in the market and some of the trends in life sciences and healthcare. Maybe I could just start with a bit of background on Terso. We are a wholly owned subsidiary division of Promega, been in business 16 years, providing inventory management solutions based upon radio frequency, RFID technology-based inventory management solutions. We've really stuck to the healthcare and life science markets and deploying those solutions. And we work with medical device manufacturers, distributors, life science manufacturers, and then also end users, acute care hospitals and laboratories. And we provide those a way for them to really get real-time visibility of inventory throughout the healthcare and life science supply chain.
Why is that so important then, Joe? I mean, it feels a bit like you're providing the RFID, you're providing the minibar on steroids to the healthcare space, and clearly there's a reason that folks need it. What's the use case? What's the pain that you solve ultimately?
Well, I think the pain is around that visibility of where inventory is within the supply chain. Today, that is predominantly done manually. Either nurses counting products on the shelf at the hospital, or medical device sales reps looking for inventory at the hospital or within a distribution center. It's a very, very manual process today. And with a lot of the pressures we're seeing in healthcare to lower cost and become more efficient, we're seeing an increased demand by these companies saying, we need to do this in a more automated way. We need to have better visibility to the inventory so we can have the inventory at the right place at the right time and in the right condition to ensure, success. At the same time, lowering the overall inventory that's required, which reduces working capital for everyone involved. Because in these markets, we cannot the idea of being out of stock just cannot happen, because we have a patient oftentimes at the end of this, and so historically the way to ensure product availability is to have just a ton of inventory everywhere, and we can't do that anymore, quite frankly, and automation is a key to that.
Yeah, I've heard stories of pacemakers and devices, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Because it's pretty hard to have those devices sat on the shelf gathering dust for a while.
Yeah, that's right. And then a lot of these products, you have expiration date issues, right? There you've got expiry, and just because of all that inventory and very manual process, a lot of write-offs just due to expiration date management. And then also in life sciences and in healthcare, many of the therapies that are provided now, including vaccines that we saw here recently with the pandemic, need to be stored at a temperature and consistently to ensure product integrity. So having chain of custody and knowing that a product has been stored at minus 4 degrees Celsius throughout its life cycle is really important to ensure that patient safety that you mentioned.
Right. And some of my good friends are scientists working there at Promega, so I was aware that they were involved in some research supporting development of vaccines and distribution of vaccines. So it's got to be pretty interesting that your RFID equipment is probably supporting some of that vaccine rollout, I imagine.
Yeah, we did see some uptake from that, and I think longer term, the pandemic in these markets has really identified even a greater need for what we do, and it's elevated the role of supply chain leaders within healthcare and life science, I think, up within those organizations. They now, we've talked to a few people that have said, hey, I really now have this a seat at the table because of the recognition that supply chain is just so important in this whole process.
Well, I've got to pick up on that then, because when you and I first met, we were sitting at an executive briefing surrounded by some of the leaders in the life science space. So these were several executive vice president of supply chain leaders of some of the largest life science companies in the US and worldwide companies. And the executive who was giving that briefing had said, supply chain leaders, as they think about the future of their trajectory of their career, what their organizations were expecting from them is they had to be able to show that they had made a real difference, not just in customer service, not just in lowering cost and supply chain, but improving the overall experience and maybe even increasing revenues. What are you seeing now? That was perhaps 2.5, 3 years ago. What are you seeing now? What are the pressures, the expectations on supply chain leaders in your space? What are they trying to achieve as they look to sort of deliver value to their organizations and dare I say it, grow their own sort of careers?
Yeah, I would say it's really more moved from being reactive in managing and really it was all about how do I take cost out of the supply chain to now deploying solutions to be more proactive in managing the supply chain. I think that's the big shift, and I think what's happening is you're seeing companies, that the vice president of supply chain reports to a C-level executive. They're getting money now in budgets to deploy these more proactive automation technologies to become more proactive. So we've seen a lot of interest in conversations we've been having, basically that's saying, hey, we have to get ahead of this, and also how do we use inventory management technologies to create a differentiated position with our customers. So going to a hospital per se as a medical device manufacturer and saying, we want to provide this value-added service based upon these technologies, but we need, we need more of your business. And really companies are seeing the use of technology as being, obviously they have their own innovative technologies and products, but these value-added services that can really help them grow their business.
Oh. So when you described that, you reminded me of something you said earlier in the conversation. You gave an example where you mentioned reps having to go, or nurses having to go to the hospital stockroom, look around, track where products are. And in our world, life science organization LifeNet, for example, had said, hey, we spend a lot of time there. We're looking to make sure that we really take care of the product. I have to give LifeNet a shout out. They sort of take parts from deceased relatives and ensure that those parts are donated, gifted, and for the living. And so that's a fantastic reason to be. What they provide is a great service, and there's many folks who be very grateful for what they do. But they really take a lot of responsibility. They say this is mission critical. We've got to make sure that any part we have gets to the right place. We cannot let it expire. It's mission critical for the whole reason we do this, and obviously very important to the families of the deceased, that we give somebody else a chance, with that body part, so to speak. So, and what they said and what they shared with us is one of the pains was that there's a lot of time involved for either the nursing staff or the sales folks to go find the product, update it. That takes time, that takes effort, and they were sort of encouraged us, led us down a path where they said, could you develop technology to help capture that demand signal, update the ERP, trigger the invoice? Is that the sort of, as you talk about added services, it sounds like there's a play for technology. And what are you seeing in the market? That's just one example. What are you seeing that sort of, as you talk about added services, where does technology come into that play?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I mean, that's a perfect use case, and one that we're very familiar with. The whole tissue and biologics, human donated tissue and biologics for Terso is, a very much a proven use case for our technology. So that demand signal that, in the past had to be kind of initiated by a sales rep or a nurse, now imagine that human donated tissue part being removed from a Terso RFID freezer, and then as soon as the nurse shuts the door, we scan and know that Nurse Joe has just removed this piece of tissue, and it's now going to be implanted in a procedure. That's automated. There's no barcode scanning or counting, so that automation of that demand signal is really what we're seeing, and the benefit to that is the fact that because there's shortages at the hospital of nurses, and also what we're seeing, the trend is the restrictions that hospitals are placing on who can come in and out of hospitals. That really is being looked at, particularly now, as we kind of come out of the pandemic. Hospitals, acute care hospitals, are really going to start to restrict the number of people that can come in and out. So again, that automation of that demand signal, because then that flows directly into an inventory management system, into an Esker system, an EHR, and down the road. It's that end-to-end automation.
No, I understand, or I believe you focus predominantly on the healthcare and the life science space. I'll let you comment on that in a minute, but I was going to say, would you extrapolate that? I'm sure you've had conversations and you've probably got visions of the future. How far does that go? I mean, does it go to the point, like, where last night I was picking up a pizza from the grocery store and I pulled the pizza out? Is that going to send a signal that, okay, that that's 1 of 10, and once we get down to 2 of 10 remaining in the freezer, we need to send a demand signal and get a replacement? How far does it go, do you think?
Well, I think for us, we're continuing to stay focused on the healthcare and life science space. I think what we have seen is the cost of the technology is coming down. The cost of an RFID tag, as an example, that you need to put on whatever you're measuring or tracking, 5 years ago was 50 cents a tag. Now it's less than 10 cents a tag. So as the cost of the technology comes down, the technology will be more applicable to other items outside of healthcare and life sciences.
One of the things that we've spoken about in the past is life science companies and the hospitals are investing in this technology. there's often both in like that sector, but also in manufacturing, warehousing, cleaning supply companies. The product will go through a distribution network before it gets to its end target, the end user or the hospital. It makes me think of a 100-year-old cleaning supply distribution company in the Northeast, and their founder, she's the daughter of the founder, their CEO, had said, "Look, what we're trying to do here, Dan, is one, we don't want field sales reps on the road calling in orders, making mistakes, because that can totally wipe out the profit. There's better things those reps can be doing. Two, we want to free up our customer service folks so they can actually engage, educate, even do some selling and make some commission, and therefore propel them into the type of job they're enjoying and make better opportunity for their families." And that's obviously important right now. Trying to retain staff is, post-pandemic, or at this point of the pandemic, seems to be critical. And then she says, ultimately, we've got to keep Amazon out of our backyard. How do you do that? Well, I think you offer technology, you try and offer lower costs, but you have to out-service, educate, and cross-sell. You've got to do all these things to keep Amazon out of your backyard. So what are you seeing in that distribution space? It sounds like that could be something that you're observing too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's being able to drive as much benefit all the way through the supply chain. So if a manufacturer tags a product, a heart valve, at the point of manufacture, they're now with RFID. They may start years ago have started with, well, we want to see that at the point of use at the hospital, but now we're seeing that that product being tracked from the point of manufacture to a big, large distribution center, maybe even then, let's say in Memphis, right? And then from Memphis, it goes to a forward stocking location in Seattle and is tracked there, and then to the actual hospital. And then the hospital, everyone is getting value on knowing where that specific product is at any given time throughout the supply chain, that end-to-end visibility.
Right. Well, that reminds me, a gentleman who I know, he worked for SAP as a technology sales rep for many years, and later formed a company, and where supply chain leaders will often deploy Esker to capture and feed orders of all different formats into an ERP, thus freeing up the sales rep. His technology would kick in after the order is fed into the ERP and really provide visibility as to where our products in the supply chain, are there any risks? Is there a risk at the dock? Is there a risk in quality and control? Is there a risk in production? Where is the risk? And it seems that with what the pandemic has highlighted is that supply chain leaders are having to sort of turn and vet and have more suppliers on their books. We've seen that need come through our procure-to-pay technology, and the need for more visibility, almost how do I call it, a heads-up display, a cockpit that shows you any sort of green, yellow, red flags in the supply chain. So it seems like visibility is needed across not just the demand, but across all these different activities that ultimately are required to get the product where it's supposed to go. Is that fair? I mean, that's my description of what I see going on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And look at the supply chain issues we're seeing across the world in all areas of life. The challenges with now as we're coming out of this is we're really challenged around inventory in all areas of the business, from your local grocery store to your automobile sector to graphics cards for computers. I mean, there's that whole need for that visibility. And as you said, that requires more vendors, probably more suppliers. So right. I think the need for this visibility has never been greater, and I don't think we will see that decreasing anytime soon.
Are there best practices that you suggest to folks who are going to explore this technology, or when the companies and the finance and supply chain leaders that turn to you folks and deploy your technology? I mean, what do you advise them? What goes well, and what are the best practices?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now, Dan, is people are getting started. This idea of waiting until we have a enterprise solution all knitted together with various technology components. For some applications that's fine, but we're seeing people that are saying, hey, we want to go now. We want to set up a small pilot to start in a region or with this distribution center. They're really getting started and then learning, iterating, kind of that agile approach. Just get started small. We call it the crawl, walk, run approach, but get started, get some learnings, get the technology going, and then deploy from there. So I think that's what we're seeing as a trend, and we think is a best practice for the deployment of our technology, but many other technologies as well.
We've here at Esker, 99% of the projects we deliver are delivered in an agile fashion, as you just described. And what we've often seen is until folks actually have the technology or have the units in place, they cannot really sort of envision, okay, what's it going to be like? How is it going to work? Do I need everything possibly that we could write on a chalkboard or a whiteboard? Maybe I don't need all those things. Maybe it'll bring more value. Maybe there's other ways or things I don't realize. And by getting the product into people's hands and starting small, we typically find, it's an opportunity. If you're going to fail quickly. If you're going to find problems, find them quickly, or you can realize value earlier. So are there other anecdotes as you've gone about deploying this technology, these units? Are there, anecdotes where folks have said, I didn't expect this, or I discovered this, but didn't realize that would be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely the case. I think integration is one of the visibility we produce, the data we provide. How much of that, how much of an integration into other systems do you need, into an ERP or a CRM? Oftentimes it can be, we need to integrate everything
Right.
and we need to start there. Well, then you come back and actually we don't need to integrate everything. We only need 15% of what we thought we needed. So that, to your point, Dan, is what the anecdotes we're seeing. One, around that data integration, but that's where I think, like we said, starting small, learning, being agile. That I think is the proper approach.
Well, I'm sure we could talk, and perhaps we will talk again. We'll talk further. For the audience who are listening in, what's the best way that they might contact you and sort of pick your brains and maybe understand if your technology would be applicable, or how they might start exploring the technology in the life science and the healthcare space? Yeah,
that'd be great. I would suggest visiting our website, which is Terso, TERSO Solutions, all one word.com, and it can give you a great overview. We've got a ton of best practice white papers, blog posts, and just overviews of our technology products and services as well. Well, Joe, thanks for coming on. Great chatting with you today, and clearly an exciting space. And it must be super exciting for you because, ironically, again, I guess the pandemic has probably accelerated in our world. The pandemic has accelerated and almost acted like the chief innovation officer. That's certainly what we see within finance and procure to pay and order to cash projects. But it seems that's true almost in any sector where you look. I imagine you're seeing something similar. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very exciting times, challenging, right, running a company during this as well. But also it gives, I think, us hope for the future in what we do, and also we're making a difference. I think what Esker does, what we do, we're making a difference in these very important sectors. And so, Dan, I appreciate the conversation today. It's been a great pleasure and an honor again, and I look forward to continued discussions down the road. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Great to have you. Thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you to Dan and Joe Pleshik for being our guest today. If you have any questions or are interested in learning more about inventory management with Terso Solutions, Joe can be reached at joe.pleshik, Pleshek, at tersosolutions.com. And as always, if you are interested in learning more about Esker and our automated solutions, you can find us at esker.com. Thanks for tuning in today, and we'll talk to you next time.